So hi everybody, welcome along to the class this morning, and those online, welcome. So we'll begin as we normally do by doing a short meditation. This is just to focus the mind and have the body calm. We'll say some prayers together and then we'll begin the class proper. So please get comfortable in your seat. Just check that your back is straight and your shoulders are relaxed. And you can close your eyes if you like, or keep them partially open. And let your body breathe itself. And be aware of the outside sounds and the movements that are taking place within your body as you inhale and exhale. And if you like, just imagine or even place a gentle smile upon your face. This will relax more than 40 muscle groups in the face and help the body to relax. So the body feels relaxed and the mind is focused. It's very easy to imagine the presence of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas in this room. You can imagine them being just above the level of your eyebrows. They're all looking at you and they are pleased. And surrounding you at the level of your seat are all other sentient beings. These will include your parents, family members, other friends and strangers, and difficult people. And think that you've recognized the commonality between yourself and the people surrounding you. What we have in common is this wish to be happy, the wish to be free from suffering, and neither of these wishes has as yet been accomplished. We are all impermanent in nature. We all change. And we all lack an inherently existent self because we dependently exist, relying upon conception and thought. So decide to lead yourself and all beings in the process of taking refuge, put an end to the suffering and its causes, and to develop all good qualities. As you do so, remember, you do not exist from your own side. You exist in mere name. And so does everyone surrounding you. And then join me in saying, I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened through the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened through the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. In response to this wish of ours, think that lights and nectars pour out of the heart of the Buddha. They wash over you and over all the beings surrounding you. And every hindrance and obstacle to your good health, your long life, your ability to develop good qualities, all of these are washed away. And the pure, open, vast qualities of mind are revealed. And upon them arise four immeasurable thoughts of compassion, love, joy, and equanimity. They decide to establish all beings within those states and say, may all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that is without suffering. May all sentient beings abide with equanimity, free from the bias of attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. In response to this wishing prayer of ours, again, lights and nectars pour out of the heart of the Buddha. They wash over you and over all the people surrounding you. And these four qualities are established firmly within your mental continuum. That you have immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable joy, and immeasurable equanimity. And you recollect the field of meritorious deeds above you. And wishing to accumulate merit and purify the mind, you say, reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own and others' merits to the great enlightenment. And then recollecting that we, the merit we've created, the sentient beings that we wish to bring to enlightenment, and the world system itself exist in mere name. We decide to offer our body, speech, and mind, our merit, and the world system to accomplish a non-abiding enlightenment, which will benefit others. And so we say, this ground, anointed with perfume, stirring with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field of offered. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. The offering has been released and the Buddha accepts it with joy. He looks down at us, he smiles, and we look up at him and we look into his eyes. We see great joy, and we feel accepted and at ease. Then the field of the bodhisattvas, the meditational deities, the arahats, and the solitary realizers, the protectors, all dissolve into light, which is absorbed into the Buddha. And from the heart of the Buddha, an emanation of himself comes out of the body, moves through space and time, and comes to rest above the crown of your head. It's facing in the same direction you are. It begins to descend, enters your skull, goes down through your throat, into your chest, and rests just above your heart. The radiance of this Buddha body begins to increase, filling your body and mind with light. And the light goes out through the pores of your skin, and it begins to fill the 10 directions of space. And wherever there are sentient beings residing within space, they're absorbed into this light and utterly transformed into the fully awakened state. Now the light withdraws, re-enters your heart. You feel yourself breathing, and you know you're sitting on a seat. You realize this meditation has been one of imagination. Nevertheless, it has imprinted the mind with this exercise. It's put into place a causal condition for your full awakening. When you engage yourself authentically with the path with the help of a spiritual mentor. So rejoice in that. And now breathe in deeply through your nostrils. Exhale through your open mouth. Allow your eyes to flutter open and move your body in whichever way you'd like to until you feel quite present and at ease. Okay, let's have a look. We're begin our class now. So let's have a look at what we have had a look at so far. So we looked at the different characteristics of mind. We know that mind is clear and knowing. Basically, mind is experience. It's whatever happens to us. There are different levels and continua of mind. So some types of mind have no beginning and some have beginnings. Some have no ends and some actually finish. We've looked at perception and conception. Conception is a lot to do with thinking, and we get at our objects indirectly. With perception, you get the object directly. We had a look at main minds. We have 6 main minds, and the mental factors, they number 51. And then we also had a look at the Buddha. No, we haven't had a look at Buddha nature. That's coming next week. So you take that off. Going too fast. We've looked at some of the delusions that we looked at last week, in particular the delusions of attachment and anger. There we go. Going too fast again. And this is some of the books I've relied upon to present the material. Probably the most, the one I've relied on mostly for this course is this one here called Samsara, Nirvana, and Buddha Nature. So it's very well written, easy to read, and pretty easy to understand, but quite deep. And so reveal to you a lot of what we don't know. That's for sure. So let's have a look at what we're going to look at today, which is ignorance and its antidotes. And basically all we need to do today is answer 2 questions, even though there's a lot of material there, right? One is to name a root delusion. That's ignorance. We're going to define it, which we'll do, and describe it, and then find ways you can actually stop it, or either in the long term or the short term. In other words, finding an antidote to ignorance. Well, like I said, so there's a lot of material here. You might get a little bit lost or think, oh my gosh, I can't retain any of it. There's only, like I say, a couple of things. What's the antidote? What is it? And a little bit about how it functions. So let's see, the way I'll do this is the same as we did last week. I'll define it. We'll look at its development and some of the problems it creates. And some of the divisions, finally looking at the antidotes. So what is ignorance? There are a number of different ways of defining it, but this is one way. So it is, as you can see, an afflictive state of unknowing, brought about by the mind's lack of clarity regarding the nature of things, such as the Four Noble Truths, three jewels, karma and its effects, and so forth. So it functions as the basis and the root of all the other afflictions and the rebirths they produce. So this definition here is a general definition, but it's accepted by all the Buddhist tenet systems. But saying that, that means that each tenet system has its own unique definition as well. But this is the one accepted by all of them. Furthermore, we have to remember that the meaning of ignorance differs according to the context. So this is what we're going to look at today. So we're going to look at 9 different ways of how ignorance can change according to the context. So just to say a few of them. So there's ignorance as a mental factor, which is often talked about in terms of how delusions are created, which we'll also talk about today. There's the ignorance of selflessness. There's the ignorance of the ultimate truth. There's ignorance of karma and its effects. There's ignorance as one of the 3 poisons. There's ignorance as the first link of dependent origination in the 12 links. Self-grasping ignorance, and there's more and more. So let's have a look at how it gets developed. And again, this is what you would have seen last week when we talked about the development of the other major 2 mental poisons, or those 2 afflictions of anger and attachment. So first of all, there's a very subtle ignorance. This is called it's got to do with the self-grasping here. And following that, there's subtle, and there we have the gross, which is the affliction itself, the sort of sense of the unknown, confusion. Now, there's different ways of looking at this presentation too. So what can be seen as subtle could be actually gross, and then the very subtle is called subtle. This depends upon what the text is you read and what the emphasis is on. But in here, because there's an affliction that's going to come out of it, I'll put it up like this. Okay, so but now let's have a look at everyday grasping ignorance. So, in the beginning, the thing that's not here, but I want to pull it out to you now, is that what we have what they call the seed of ignorance upon our mind stream, which means that we are so familiar with it that whatever we perceive or conceive is mixed with this ignorance. That's what you've got to try and remember. So in other words, depend upon the tenet system, whatever you think of or whatever you engage with your senses, that object is going to appear to you as either being self-sufficient, substantially existent, or inherently existent. These are just 2 forms of ignorance. One is more gross than the other. So what does this mean? Basically, it means that when you sort of think something, there always appears to be a thinker and then the thought. So there's always like this idea of two. Same as when you open your eyes up and you just look at the world, there's me here and the world is there. It's natural. So you call that innate. And just look at that is the case. It doesn't mean that we believe it, because there's many people that this happens and they don't believe it. They see it's not the case. But if you haven't trained yourself or thought about it, it's just a natural occurrence. Now, this often you see this if you watch babies. They're trying to make sense of who they are, and there's definitely a time that comes. There's definitely this thing that like I'm here and the world is there, and before that, you're trying to find your boundaries, isn't it? They're doing all sorts of things to go like make some meaning of or understand this environment they're in. There's a definite part where they go, okay, no, like I'm different. There's a world there, and there's me. So this idea of a me arising, a sense of I. According to all the Buddhist schools, except the middle way consequence school. Middle way consequence, another name for it is called prasangika, but middle way consequence is English, easier to remember. So according to every Buddhist school except for the middle way consequence school, the view of a personal identity, so the idea of oneself, is a corrupt intelligence that, referring to the mental and physical aggregates, grasps them to be either a self-sufficiently, substantially existing I or mine. So what's this saying? So it's saying that when the person identifies themselves with their body and what belongs to it, like your limbs, your ideas. So this is, when you first get introduced to Buddhism, that's usually the way it's presented to you. And you think about it like that for years. It takes you years, which at least it took me years to go, I don't, you work out that can't be right. But like I said, all the Buddhist 10 systems are saying that's the object, that's where it is. But you are not your body, and you are not your mind, and you're not anything that belongs to the body or the mind. Right? So there must be another object. And so the middle way consequence say, yeah, there is. It's your I. You grasp at the I to inherently exist. But there's this thing, isn't there? So our thing is, look at what the heck? I mean, what is that? Well, it's the name I. You grab that to be, that's me. But not your body, not your mind, not what the body and mind possess. But that one that just goes I, that's only the middle way consequence form. That's the most subtle view of emptiness. Once, if you don't get that, then it's very hard to work out, well, what's the difference here between a self-sufficient, substantially existent person and an inherently existent person? Because when you do the analysis is the same for either. You don't do a different analysis, it's the same analysis.
Just objects.
The object is different. That's right. According to the middle way consequence, they say that the ignorance is a corrupt intelligence that observing the nominally existent I or mine grasps it to exist inherently. And that's basically just what I was trying to say to you. Again, so from the distance from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, from Samsara, Nirvana, Buddha, they teach us the subtle view of a personal identity that grasps the I and mine to be inherently existent is the actual view of a personal identity. This has ramifications for the meditation on selflessness, because realizing the selflessness, that is the absence of only a self-sufficient, substantially existent I and mine, will not free us. And yet that's the place where we normally start. And so sometimes if they go back further, they look at you and say, well, are you, non-Buddhist schools used to think that we were permanent. The self is a permanent entity that went from life to life, like a soul. So the Buddha refuted that. And all the Buddhist schools will go along with that. They say, yeah, there's no such person like that, right? So then how does the person, what's the next thing? Well, the person who owns a body and mind, who says, you know, my arms, my legs, my ideas, that person. How's that existing? They say, well, it's self-sufficient. It's enough for itself to exist. It doesn't rely on anything. It's not independent. So we check. We say, no such person. Well, that's it. Solved. Middle way consequence goes, no, it's not solved. There's an even more deeper level of misunderstanding, deeper level of confusion.
I don't think I understand the distinction.
What's it say?
I don't think I understand the distinction.
Yeah, I know it takes time, that's for sure.
But what is this?
So it goes impermanent to
No, it goes from permanent,
I understand that.
self-sufficient,
Yeah.
and then self.
nominal.
No,
Nominally
nominal
existent.
self is just inherent existence. You'd say inherent
So what is
existence.
the difference between inherent and non-independent existence?
The simplest way that I worked out was that a self-sufficient substantial existence is like an owner that's within the aggregates.
As if there's some entity.
Yeah, that's right.
Whereas the inherent.
Is that one? The difference there is this phenomenon called the person. The person is called I, or person. Right? So that name, I, that's taken to exist without dependence upon a body and a mind.
Right. But that's the nominally existent.
That's right.
But it just isn't.
Inherently
means
existent.
that it's like
Not dependent.
no. So it's pretty simple though, really.
You think so, except it's not. I mean, it seems like that, but it's not.
Is there not
No, there's an I.
Nominally.
That nominally exists an I, the name I, that exists. Right? It's given to the body and mind. That's right. The I is not the body or the mind or the combination of them or something external to them. That's what it's not.
So the I exists to self-grasp, to do all that sort of.
Yeah, the I exists as an imputation, a name given to the body and mind. That name is grasped by ignorance to have an existence, a true existence,
More.
more than just that imputed name.
So the I is the self-grasping part. So if then
No. The I is not. The self-grasping part is a consciousness. It's a mind grasping that name, I.
So what would the Buddhist just say? That there is,
Oh, sorry. What is?
like say an enlightened being person, what would they say? They have no I?
Yeah, they have an I. Everybody does. Yeah, that's,
But
just,
I understand
yeah.
how it's.
that's right. It's just a name.
Doesn't make this much difference.
Yeah, imputed to the body and mind.
Yeah.
So, like I said, so when we just ideas, everything else that appears inherently existent. It's simply said, the objects appear to have an objective existence. They exist in themselves.
That's how they appear.
That's how they appear. Then you believe it, because it just looks like that. And everybody else agrees it's like that. So it starts like that. So what we're doing is the appearance is being exaggerated. Not because the appearance is actually dependent, but it's appearing not dependent. There's an exaggeration going on. We believe it. And then all the afflictions start up, right?
I can't believe this is called everyday self-grasping.
Yeah.
Every second, every nanosecond.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. That's right. And so from this, of course, arise what they call the auxiliary afflictions.
But self here doesn't only mean about I, right? It means any of.
Self is referring to two objects here. One, the self that does exist, which is the merely imputed person, and then the self, that same self that is grasped by ignorance, so now that it appears to be inherently existent or self-sufficiently existent. So two meanings for self here.
Oh, I thought self-grasping, sometimes I get confused about how it's used, because it sounds like it's just about like to buy. But sometimes it seems to be used about all of like.
Yeah, that's right. So I've got something in here about that. Actually, it'll come up because I've marked that out. Well, that's interesting. Sandy, you're going to say something?
I was just going to say, so the self that does exist is the mere I.
That's right.
And you said the self that, what was the first thing you said when you were answering your question?
I say so. The mere I, which is the only I that does exist. It is grasped or held by or ascertained by the mind of ignorance. And when it does that, this merely imputed I appears to inherently exist. And there's the belief that goes with it. Oh, it is that way. So we've got ignorance, and then there's ignorance and attachments. There's a whole lot of different delusions that arise from that, like pretension, deceit, irrational passion, socially influenced minds, and so forth. And then we've got this ignorance tied in with attachment and anger. Not at the same time, but at different times. So that's what is some of those, distraction, heedlessness, lack of integrity, disrespect, all these sort of things. Let's see if I missed something out. So for you, Cassie, and for you, Sue, because I thought, oh, you guys would like this. Anyway, let's. So we've had a little discussion about this already. What's interesting? Is there anything else that's interesting about this or is making you think about it? Sue.
No, instead of not knowing.
Yeah.
That word got me a bit stuck.
Yeah. So there's two things with the unknown. It's like, so ignorance is something like you just don't know something.
But that's not a.
Yeah. But that's one aspect of ignorance, but it's not the ignorance we're really talking about here. I mean, you could say, yeah, you don't know the reality of how you exist. The ignorance here is saying, not only do you not know it, you actually think you do know it. Yeah, it's a wrong awareness. Right? So it's taking something and you thinking it's true, but in fact you're wrong.
And that makes it afflictive.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Sandy?
So is it safe to say, I mean, I think it's only, but just looking at it backwards, that anything we conceive of or perceive is wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
So anything.
No, some of it depends.
Perceiving and conceiving.
It's mistaken. It's mistaken.
It's mistaken.
Mistaken, but not necessarily wrong.
Mistaken in that we can't trust it.
Mistaken that it appears to inherently exist.
Yes. And because it doesn't inherently
Exist.
that.
It can produce wrong consciousnesses.
Yeah.
But it doesn't follow that every consciousness is wrong, because there's a lot of them that aren't. They're just mixed up with this inherent existence. So they'll appear to be inherently existent. That's the afflictive thing.
Eddie, this happens a lot with actors. Like there's very few actors that ever want to play Hitler because they'll, even though people know they're an actor and not Hitler, they appear like that and it sticks.
Yeah.
And that's why you often hear stories, don't you, of people who take on acting roles and it takes a long time to come out of it. They're so, get into character, as it said. So let's do a meditation. Okay, so get comfortable in your seat. Let your shoulders relax. Perhaps take a deep breath in through your nostrils and then exhale, and then return to breathing normally. I want you to imagine yourself delving into the depths of your mind. You're seeking to unravel the veils of ignorance that obscure the truth. So just for a few moments, contemplate the different layers of ignorance, from the very subtle to the gross. Understanding how each contributes to your suffering. It visualizes innate ignorance, deeply rooted in the belief of an inherently existing self, and how it fuels the cycle of egocentricity and the afflictions like attachment and aversion. Reflect on how this innate ignorance influences all other mental states, driving the actions and reactions of unenlightened beings like ourselves. Now, there is a subtle ignorance which arises from misunderstanding the relationship of cause and effect, leading to karma and selfish concerns. Imagine how the subtle ignorance acts as a bridge between the very subtle and gross states of mind. How it perpetuates the cycle of suffering. The gross ignorance is characterized by 4 wrong views. It supports misconceptions about the nature of existence. 4 wrong views: I see permanence where there is none. I see self where the selfless is. I see inherent existence when there's lack of inherent existence. I see pleasure where there is none. So these wrong views perpetuate ignorance and give rise to the afflictions. So visualize the manifestations of ignorance in your own life. Recognize how it gives rise to afflictions like dullness, forgetfulness, laziness. Take a moment to reflect on the auxiliary afflictions that stem from ignorance and attachment, such as pretension, deceit, and irrational passion. Contemplate how these negative mind states depend on the physical nervous system and social conditioning, which perpetuate suffering in society. And finally, imagine that there is a potential for transformation. Understanding that while some afflictions may seem overpowering, with mindfulness and introspection, they can be gradually overcome, leading to liberation from ignorance and suffering. I think that you want to know about this potential and how to apply it. And I was breathing in through your nostrils, exhaling, allowing your attention to come back to the room. We're going to have now a look at the different divisions of ignorance. And we do that by looking at what they call the entity, the object, and the tenet system, or the systems of belief. So in terms of entity, there's an ignorance regarding the two truths. The two truths are conventional truths and ultimate truths. And you can be ignorant of both, and you can also be ignorant of how these two work together. I remember how I always used to think that an ultimate truth was something completely different from a conventional truth. They were separate. And I tried very hard to find such a truth and was unable to. I didn't even realize, I thought, well, no, it can't be, I just can't find one. It's just no. And what I was looking for was an ultimate truth separate from a conventional truth. Right?
Or we think ultimate is the main one.
Yeah, that's right. So I'll look for that, right? So when I was thinking about 15, 16 trying to do this, and then realizing, no, it can't exist because I can't find one, right? But I'm just looking in the wrong place, looking wrongly.
When you were 15, you were trying to find the ultimate truth.
Yeah. So there's that, right? So, and then there's, what else is there? So these two truths actually, all types of ignorance can be included within these two. There's also ignorance in terms of having the innate ignorance. This was talking before about the seed. So as soon as we conceive and think, we're always mistaken about these objects. But then we have intellectual ideas about what ignorance is, and that's a bit easier to overcome. And then we also have an ignorance to do with the mundane and supramundane. So in terms of the mundane, we're talking about cause and effect. And the supramundane, we're talking about the emptiness of the phenomena. So it says ignorance of the mundane, actions and their effects or karma, and ignorance of the supramundane, emptiness. Whereas the first is the cause of lower rebirth in particular. The second is the cause of rebirth in samsara. Objects, you can have ignorance in relationship to the person and then phenomena. So it's one of the ways, more obvious ways I often talk about selflessness. The selflessness of persons or the selflessness of anything else other than the person.
That's what it is.
Yeah, sure. And in the different tenet systems, so we have gross and subtle. So the gross systems are all the ways of presenting ignorance that are not the same as the middle way consequence. That's a simple way of saying it. So middle way consequence is all about subtle emptiness, a lack of inherent existence. Every other system, they're talking about gross emptiness, the lack of a self-sufficient, substantially distant person or entity, but they think it's the subtle, because it is subtle in comparison with being permanent, independent, and singular. So this idea of the persons being permanent, independent, and singular was the view of non-Buddhists, ordinary people. So it's not even included within the 10 systems of the Buddhists. It's like, well, that's not a view we hold. In fact, that's the easiest one to refute. So they did. But then they said, well, we've got wrong ideas ourselves, right? And so these wrong ideas exist self-sufficiently, substantially existent, or inherently. But again, like I said, it's only with the middle way consequence that's gone further and gone, inherent existence is the problem, the deepest problem. So let's just start now having a look at these 9 factors. What's our time going? So the first is this mental factor called ignorance. So simply the minds of all beings in the desire realm, form realm, and formless realm are completely pervaded by ignorance. There's never a time when ordinary beings do not develop ignorance. And like I'm saying, it's not surprising when you just walk around the world. It just always looks like up here and the world is there. So it goes on and on. Now, I'll say so. Here's something for you, Sue. Right? So this might do your heads in a bit, but it's interesting. So the middle way consequence school, before that, so Vasubandhu, so the people beneath the middle way consequence school, so every tenet system beneath, mind, middle way autonomous, mind only, sutra, and a great exposition. These are other 4 tenet systems, right? They say that ignorance accompanies all afflictions. So wherever an affliction goes, ignorance goes with it. Always. That's what they think and say. But the middle way assert that self-grasping ignorance provokes false afflictions, but does not accompany them. Right? Why? Because the two have different functions. Self-grasping ignorance grasps its object as inherently existent, while attachment craves an object seen as attractive and desirable. Different functions. Self-grasping ignorance arises first and attachment follows. Because they perform different functions and do not occur at the same time, the middle way consequence say self-grasping ignorance and attachment do not share the same primary mind and do not accompany each other. I know, that's what I thought. I just got to go, wow, you'd like to hear this.
I think hard to swallow just because wouldn't it be true that if in any time you broke the ignorance, it's like broke, so it implies that the ignorance continues, like the ignorance is still there while you're feeling the attachments. It's required. That's a good point of view.
Yeah. So however, it's the middle way, right? However, the middle way say that self-grasping ignorance can accompany subtle afflictions, because subtle attachment and anger have an element of grasping phenomena as inherently existent. Subtle attachment grasps its object as inherently desirable and craves to possess it, just like we're saying, right? Subtle anger grasps its object as inherently undesirable and craves to be separated from it. These subtle afflictions are obstacles to attaining nirvana, but do not necessarily hinder having a good rebirth. The lower schools do not consider subtle afflictions to prevent nirvana because they assert inherent existence. This is another thing. Once you get your head around this, it's going to amaze you. Divisions, you go, of course, every system beneath the middle way consequence asserts inherent existence.
So is that why you've got the formless realm with people with the
Yeah, you make this mistake. That's right.
Yeah, that is
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And also, so there's a explanation in Tantra that when you go through the dying stages, the gross anger, the gross attachment falls away. And then it comes out and there's the subtle. and they're lost within the minds of white, red, and black appearance. They diminish. That's when they sort of lose their power there. Anyway, that was interesting, wasn't it? Right. That'll probably come up in a class somewhere with Rinpoche.
Yeah. Where did you get that?
That's from Samsara, Nirvana, and Buddha Nature on page 75. Okay, so next, ignorance. Oh, sorry, here it is. The definition: a mental factor that is confused about the nature of an object, and it functions to induce wrong awareness, doubt, and other delusions. The next one is the ignorance of selflessness. In other words, they do not understand the selflessness of persons. The ignorance of selflessness, in the meaning common to all Buddhist tenet schools. So the person does not understand the selflessness of persons, their lack of being permanent, independent, and singular. So this is the meaning of selflessness common to all the Buddhist tenet systems. That this is one place where they all agree. No such person. Next one is ignorance of the ultimate truth. What does this mean? The person does not know the mode of existence of all persons and phenomena.
So is that like one's coming at from selflessness, the other from just a different direction of ultimate truth?
Well, the last one was this one where we were talking about permanent, independent, and singular, right? So everybody agrees with that. All the Buddhists agree with that. But and that's for, they're attacking there the non-Buddhists. So here, this is probably for the Buddhists.
So this would be something that different kinds of Buddhists would disagree on.
Yeah, this is right. In fact, they got the four tenet systems, so they're going to have all these disagreements here. So especially like, what is the person? What's the person? So three systems will say, none of them will ever say it's the body. There's no Buddhist system that says a person is the physical body. None. So then it's got to be, okay, so it's got to be some idea about mind, isn't it? Person, so some say the person is this type of mind. Others say no, it's a different type of mind. And some say it's the continuum of mind. So there's different presentations there. And of course, the middle way cultsmen don't have any of that. They go, none of them.
No, so this one starts talking about phenomena, whereas
That's right.
it's just
Just the persons.
Yeah.
That's true too, Debbie. That's right. So here we're talking about the five aggregates and persons. Okay, now a simpler one, ignorance of karma and its effects, right? It's simply not knowing about karma and its effects. It is not simply not knowing about karma and its effects, but either having a strong disbelief in it or a temporary disregard for it. So it's just a simple one, isn't it? Where people say in the world, now, this is my parents, they always tell you not to steal because of the terrible things that happen to you. And my thought would be, yeah, what if you don't get caught?
Is that the temporary disregard?
Yes, as a temporary disregard until you get caught. And so you know, oh, that's what Mum was talking about.
So it's kind of like the Aussie, she'll be right, mate.
Yeah, that's right. No worries. Yeah, it's just a disregard for, especially for us, it's this long-term cause and effect. Yeah, it's not obvious that something you could do now might have an effect on you 50 years in the future.
Well, we don't even get external cause and effect, let alone karmic cause and effect.
Well, just thinking, as I said, actually we do in some cases. Like, for instance, if somebody tells you, like, if you eat this food consistently, this is the health outcome for you 20 years down the line. You might go, oh, And then you go to the hospital and you see people actually suffering because they didn't heed the advice. You'd go, okay, I'm not going to do that. So many people never smoked for reasons like that, haven't they? Others have not drunk alcohol because they say, oh my gosh, I saw what happened to my mum or dad. No. But they know there's these longer term outcomes. But that's, worldly physical
But
cause
the
and
long
effect.
term makes it actually easier to temporarily disregard it
Yeah,
until,
that's right.
until the
That's right.
long term becomes the short term.
That's right. Yeah. So this is one of the types of ignorance. Number 5. So here, ignorance is one of the 3 basic factors which spurs the creation of destructive karma and also brings about the process of rebirth. So here it's often translated as confusion. So sometimes when you read the Nyingma text or the Kagyu text, you'll see ignorance described as confusion. Here it is in the first link of dependent origination. So ignorance here starts a new set of 12 links that leads to rebirth in samsara. And again, tenet systems have different assertions about this ignorance. So I've come across them in reading and, so first of all, I talk about self-grasping of a self-sufficient, substantially existent person. I thought, well, that's it. Then years go by and then you also hang on a minute, that's the gross presentation. Middle way consequence would say no to that. No, it's grasping an inherently existent person. That's the root of it. Number 7, self-grasping ignorance. So this one here believes persons and phenomena to be inherently existent. So this is really this consciousness. The self-grasping ignorance grasps the persons and the phenomena as inherently existent. It first grasps the aggregates as inherently existent, and on that basis grasps the person to be inherently existent.
So what's the difference between this one and the previous one?
Which one are you talking about? Number 6, the
Yeah.
previous? The first link of dependent origination. This one this is.
Is this the grasping part of the ignorance or?
Yes, so this is the first link, and this other one here is the 7th link. Right? Because remember, we're talking about context. So the self-grasping ignorance is terms of the grasping that comes after feeling, isn't it?
Craving.
The craving, grasping, one of those two. So like that. Well, I think we've talked some of the things we're talking about the same thing, but sometimes we're talking about the meaning changes because the context has changed.
Because it's in the 12 links.
Yeah, that's right. This one here is like within the 12 links, and the other one we're talking about a much bigger, broader picture. So here's someone, Cassandra. So this is technically speaking, self-grasping ignorance and self-grasping are not the same. This is what we were saying before about how we use these terms. Self-grasping ignorance refers to the mental factor of ignorance that grasps inherent existence, while self-grasping refers to the entire mental state, the primary consciousness and its accompanying mental factors that include self-grasping ignorance. In other words, when ignorance, grasping inherent existence, accompanies a mental state, all aspects of that mental state grasp inherent existence, don't they? However, sometimes self-grasping and self-grasping ignorance are used interchangeably. In this case, the speaker's purpose is not to distinguish the mental factor from the entire mental state, but to identify inherent existence and how we grasp objects and people to exist in this way. So as you can see, the topic of ignorance is complex, and we need a lot of wisdom to understand it. Page 75, Demi.
Yeah.
Holiness. I love the
The
same
bigger
book.
one, the
Yeah,
self-grasping
self-grasping.
or the self-grasping
No,
ignorance?
it's
The bigger one
self-grasping.
is
is the big one,
self-grasping,
Yeah,
and within it is self-grasping ignorance.
ignorance, that's right.
And what else would be in it?
Feeling.
Uh,
Every other mental state that accompanies that main mind. Yeah, so this is when we talk about the main minds and mental factors. Where the mental factors contaminate, the whole main mind is contaminated. That means feeling, discrimination, all these other things are contaminated. It's the self, in this case, with the self-grasping.
So just summarizing, self-grasping ignorance is a specific mental factor.
Yeah,
Ignorance is like the whole main mind and the mental factors that have been contaminated by ignorance.
so let's call it, this is for self-grasping. Right? So that form, the ignorance, a form of ignorance for self-grasping, yes,
is the big one.
is the bigger one.
But just
Yeah.
check your context. Sometimes people won't differentiate it like that.
Yeah, that's right. So often if they differentiate, the teacher will have a purpose for differentiating it. Yeah, because they're just, the major purposes here, the mental factors or just in general.
The picture of the monkey grasping the fruit is great. That's a really great way to
Yeah.
remember it.
So then we've got these 4 distorted conceptions that I brought up in the meditation. So like I said then, to see the impermanent as permanent. That which is dukkha by nature to be pleasurable, meaning that which is suffering by nature to actually be pleasurable. The unattractive is beautiful, and which lacks a self to have one.
And they're the 4 distorted conceptions
Yeah.
to do with
Ignorance.
which is the true origins.
Yeah, so here, like just yeah, this has to do with true origins in terms of Four Noble Truths. Yeah. In the Pali tradition, they also have a view of ignorance, of course. Yeah? So it's this one. So not knowing the 4 truths, not knowing past and future lives, and not knowing dependent origination. So you can see here, this is just a not knowing. It's quite interesting in a way, isn't it? All these different ways of seeing this phenomenon called ignorance.
So not knowing, does that mean it's not counted as afflictive? It's just a not
Yeah,
knowing.
just to not know, you just don't know something. Like, someone's even nowadays, it's like, geez, you're ignorant. But you know what I mean? Like you don't know something. Yeah, no, that's right. It's just that you don't know.
And then
Yeah, that's right. It's not an unknown. It's not a non-known. It's not the other one where you think you know.
so the Sanskrit tradition has what distinction? It's afflictive, not.
Yeah, the difference here is in the Mahayana tradition or Sanskrit tradition, their way of thinking is that you wrongly know something. It's not that you don't know something, you wrongly know it. Yeah, you misknow it. That's the real root of it, not the fact that you don't know. Okay, meditation time.
No.
So again, just be comfortable in your seat. Wriggle about, relax your shoulders. And just imagine you're sitting in a really serene space. And from within this serene space, you're able to visualize the divisions of ignorance unfolding before you like a scroll. Each form becoming clearer as you delve deeper into your mind's eye. But first, we contemplate the twofold division of ignorance. Ignorance of conventional truths and ignorance of ultimate truths. And we can see how these two categories encompass all forms of ignorance. There we go. Further into the twofold division of innate and intellectually acquired ignorance. Recognize our cultural, environmental, and religious influences shape our perceptions and understanding. Intellectually acquired ignorance. Now envision the distinction between ignorance of the mundane and ignorance of the supramundane. See how ignorance of actions and their effects leads to rebirth in the lower realms, while ignorance of emptiness perpetuates samsara existence. Now we can reflect on the fundamental ignorance of the ultimate nature of phenomena. This is the very root of samsara and the source of all mistakes. To understand how this ignorance develops in stages, culminating in self-grasping. Now contemplate the pervasiveness of ignorance across all realms of existence. And recognize its constant presence in the minds of ordinary persons like ourselves. Then reflect on the relationship between ignorance and affliction. And understand how self-grasping ignorance precedes and provokes false afflictions, leading to the cycle of suffering. Imagine the intricate interplay between self-grasping ignorance and subtle afflictions. And see how they hinder liberation, despite not necessarily leading to lower rebirth. And visualize the various forms of ignorance, including ignorance of selflessness and ignorance of karma and its effects, each contributing to the cycle of suffering. Then contemplate the distinction between self-grasping ignorance and self-grasping. Understanding how the former, self-grasping ignorance, grasps inherent existence, while the latter encompasses the entire mental state. And finally, we can acknowledge the complexity of ignorance and the necessity of wisdom to unravel its intricacies. Knowing that true knowledge is the antidote to ignorance and a path to liberation. Again, breathing in through your nostrils. Exhale through your mouth. Now your eyes to flutter open. And let's now look at how we can abandon this ignorance. So we want to eradicate it, but we can't do it all at once. It's two ways. You temporarily eradicate it, and there's the complete eradication of it. So temporarily, we eradicate ignorance using the three wisdoms. These are the wisdoms of hearing, reflection, and meditation. And so look, we're right here now, we are listening, and we've been thinking also, haven't we? We've been reflecting on it. What does this mean to me? Is it like this or like that? So we need to reflect first to get a clear picture of what it is. And then we can become We can cultivate our understanding. Well, this is what ignorance is. This is how it manifests. When it does, this is how the world appears to me. This is what my mind does. Another way to temporarily abandon ignorance or get at it is through the cherishing of others. Because this ignorance primarily really helps the afflictions grow. Afflictions of aversion, hatred, lust, these sort of things. So temporarily, we can put in place a sense of kindness, affection towards others, and not follow what ignorance is trying to lead us towards, which is just problem. That's what's going to happen. It's going to be a big mess. Yeah. So if we consider others kindly and cherish them, we sort of step back a little, hinder it. And one of the most common ways of helping you do this is to use similes and metaphors.
I said smiles.
Just smile. It's okay. She can wait. Not such a big deal. Yeah. Now, to completely eradicate it, there's basically only one method, but I'll put two. One is called selflessness and the other is called emptiness. So basically the same thing from the point of view of the middle way consequence. So, sorry, in the temporary way, in terms of the similes, I didn't mention this, but in the Diamond Cutter Sutra, there are those 9 similes, right? Like a star, like a visual aberration, like the flame of a lamp, like a magician's illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble in a stream, a dream, flash of lightning, a summer cloud. Like each of those shows you impermanence and emptiness. In terms of this complete understanding, so this is from Geshe Tashi Tsering from Buddhist psychology. He says, simply attaining an intellectual understanding of the term ignorance is a challenge. But setting about overcoming it in our own minds is a much larger task. Within the two aspects of the path to enlightenment, method and wisdom, practices for prevailing over ignorance are encompassed within the category of wisdom. So wisdom refers to an unmistaken understanding of how things exist, and ignorance is the primary hindrance to wisdom.
It just makes it sound like ignorance is actually very active because it's a hindrance rather than being a passive thing, like an active.
Well, it's got aspects of both. Like what's always appearing is like this passive thing. Right? That's the innate. But then we go along with it.
And do the
And
grasping.
do the grasping. Yeah. So now I'm going to want to introduce this topic to you. So the major form of ignorance is the belief that self is inherently existent. So the term self here just means inherently existent. There's other ways of using the self for the person, isn't there? So let's take this view. Okay, so, and the person is the I. Right, so the view here is, the source of all problems here is the I is seen to be an inherently existent phenomenon, an inherently existent thing. Now, if this were the case, if it were the case that the I were inherently existent, how would it exist? What's the simplest way you can say, well, okay, but I inherently exists in this way?
And change.
So
Wouldn't change.
would not change, right? Not depend upon other,
Its own side.
from its own side. Yeah, all these things, the simplest thing, it would not depend on others. Now, the thing here is, what you've got to ask yourself is, what are the others? Now, the others are, quite simply said, causes and conditions. So when you say, it will appear permanent, right? So that's taking out causes and conditions. Doesn't depend upon causes and conditions, so it appears permanent. That's one thing. The other one is to say without parts, or meaning without a basis of designation. So what are these parts? The body and mind. So in other words, it says, okay, so if the I inherently exists, I could remove the body and mind, and I would be there. This is it, isn't it? Not dependent upon. So move out the things it depends on and go, there I am. Well, are you? Because if you're not, you don't inherently exist. If you're not, and you know it, you've just found the selflessness or the emptiness of yourself. Third one is, person exists dependent upon thought and name. Now, this I find really effective. Yeah, you do that, just go, okay, so here I am. I'm going to remove all thought. I'm going to take consciousness out of the picture, and I'll be there. Right? Let's just sit there and try it.
Not just your consciousness, but anyone else's.
You with yourself. This is okay. So, what do you see? What do you find?
You can't see or find anything.
Yeah. So that's the selflessness. It's not nothing. It's you're not there. You see, you could not be there. That's the selflessness. And so that's what we've got to become familiar with. I think the while I've been doing this in Biffy, because we've been talking about, I thought, wow, that is so straightforward. Right? Move consciousness out. And if you're not there, you don't inherently exist. Knowing that you don't inherently exist is selflessness. Chandrakirti says, not seeing is perfect seeing. So you don't see yourself there, do you? I mean, you just do that, just to go, wow, what's there? Well, not self. It's not nothing. It's not nothing because there's something there, isn't there? There's the knowing that you're not there. So this is what the Kagyu and Nyingma are really big on, by coming to that. They say you don't have to do it, just relax and watch. Just relax and look. Are you there? And you know that you're there. Do you? Yeah, that's it. The other way you can do it, which is also really interesting, is put yourself up there and say, okay, so like I is a name. Is it not?
Yes.
I is the name given to the body and mind. So I'll pull out thought and mind. If I say thought and name, there I am. Well, are you? No. It's the selfless person again. That's the emptiness of a person. Because if you were there, that would be the inherently existing person. Because that's what it's saying. Without any dependence, phenomena exists. That's inherent existence. That's the root of all ignorance.
Seems like a magician's trick.
Well, it is. Shady.
Eddie, when you say thought, is that the same as imputation?
Yeah, so thought imputes internally and language imputes externally. So when we say imputed, right? Like what? With name and conception. So conception is thought, name is language.
Perception is thought, name is language.
Yeah. So in other words, say, can you exist without language and awareness? Because if you do, you'd inherently exist. And there would be nothing wrong with that, because that's, that'd be a valid discovery, wouldn't it? But you don't find that. You find this absence. That absence is emptiness. That's the emptiness, the absence. And you'll also find when you do it, you don't put anything forward, do you? Like from your side, it's just like There's nothing to say, really, is there? It's just, you're not there. So this is like this non-affirming negation. You're not putting anything up, you're just seeing what's not there. And that's what you're meant to see, what's not there. What's not there, an inherent existence of. So,
Can I just clarify with the same expression, thought includes internally and name includes externally?
that's right, that's exactly right, yeah. So now what do we do with this information? All right, because you just find that that is the way it is. Our existence depends upon a name and a thought. That's how we actually exist. The name is I. That's our existence. And this name and thought is given I to the valid base, body and mind. Now, once you sort of get your head around this, it's like, okay, so what's required of me is to integrate, that's wisdom, right? What we just did, that's wisdom. I not only do I need to know how I exist and everybody else and all the phenomena, because it's not ruling out our non-existence, is it? I mean, we're right here and we just discovered we're not there, right? Inherently. So we want to do something with our lives. Right? So that's to attain enlightenment to benefit ourselves and others, right? So this discovery of ourselves, you got to move like, if you're like that, everybody else is like that too. In fact, any phenomenon is like that. Because all you got to do is move the analysis over to the other object and you'll find it's the same thing. Move your awareness away, move your name away. Is the thing still there? No. If you give it a name and you're aware of it, is it there? Yeah. So we've got to integrate this understanding with whatever we do. Because whatever we do is the method side. And what we just discovered, that's the wisdom side. So we've got to bring them together. And when we first start, of course, we don't. Like we said, we do one thing at a time, because that's just how you do it at the beginning. You've got to try and work one the other. The easiest thing, of course, is the method for us. We can be kind people, we can restrain ourselves from hurting people, all that stuff. That's method side. But remember, right along with every method is conventional consciousness. They're all polluted by this view of inherent existence, and there's a grasping at it. So we've got to work against that belief that we're really there, we truly exist, that the phenomena truly exist, without depends upon consciousness and name. So this means that when we do our activities, we think, okay, so I, like Murphy said, don't exist from my own side. I don't exist from the side of the body and mind. I'm not there. But I'm not there as a person independent, not depending upon conceptions and names. How do I know? I found that out just a couple of minutes ago. And I discovered I'm not there. So you've got to remember that, well, I'm not there. Then you got to think, okay, the activities that I'm doing, all these good acts is virtue. Well, that exists in the same way. It requires conception. Every virtue you can think of is a conception. It's an idea given a name. Therefore, it doesn't truly exist. It's empty. But it exists. That's how it exists. Right? All these people. Same thing again. They're not there from their own side. They just only depend upon the name, people, and a consciousness that can apprehend them, conceive of them. That's how they exist. And enlightenment too. So these three empties, it's called the three empty spheres: the person, the activity, and the goal. They exist in dependence upon name and thought. But you've got to be independent of a name and thought. So here, so finally, it says, our great compassion, which is rooted in the cherishing of others, needs to be simultaneously understood as a dependent arising and empty of intrinsic nature. So empty and dependent, these two go together.
So while we're practicing great compassion, we've got to remember these three
Empty,
empty
that's right,
states.
yeah. So he says, while our methods are naturally empty, because they are, everything is naturally empty. While our methods are naturally empty of intrinsic nature, because there are no phenomena with an intrinsic nature, this fact has not been integrated into our behavior. So it is cultivated before we act in our motivation. Integration is important because we don't want our virtue to become true origins in the ordinary sense. But we don't want all this goodness to just keep us in samsara and producing good outcomes in samsara. We've got to get out. So if you put it together with the empty aspect, you get the good effect in this life, but you get a better effect to get you out. Right? Otherwise, you just get a partial effect. A good person in cyclic existence. Nothing to be sneezed at. There's good people out there. Okay, that's what I want to share. Let's do last meditation. Okay, so you're at ease, you're sitting in your chair, everything's okay, and you're breathing normally and naturally. You just take a moment and do your best to reflect on the interdependence of all phenomena. All phenomena includes yourself, your virtues and actions. Oneself, virtues and actions are interdependent. Therefore, they are empty of intrinsic nature. But try to imagine the self that exists without depending upon thought. What do you find? Try to imagine a self that exists without depending upon name. Do you find? So acknowledge that hearing, contemplation, and meditation guide you towards recognizing and transcending ignorance. Recognize the transient nature of your thoughts and the underlying motivations driving them. And then acknowledge that there is a unity across different Buddhist traditions in their approach to eliminating ignorance. But cherish the concept of emptiness. Cherish its role in achieving ultimate freedom from ignorance for yourself. And then visualize the interconnectedness of all beings, recognizing their role in your path towards enlightenment. and understand the importance of pure teachings as a guide to spiritual realization. And imagine your mind as inherently pure, luminous, and knowing, transcending afflictions. Recognize that non-conceptuality is a profound state of realization beyond mere thoughts. And see all phenomena as manifestations of the basic mind, and thereby embrace the principle of emptiness. And you're just breathing in, exhale, and let it all go. We've come to the end of our class. Are there any last questions online with you?
No, but Anthea got it right, with how would a self exist if it were, you know,
Not dependent
yeah,
upon name
yeah,
and
yeah,
thought.
yeah. So anyway, I just had to say,
Yeah, good.
she got it spot on, but
Good.
I didn't get to pick it up.
Okay. Yes, as this only rose to me yesterday after our class, I walked away and I was like, oh my gosh. I should have try this out. I didn't realize, going, wow. Yeah. Yeah. So we should know what ignorance is. Yeah. How it develops, and that there are some antidotes to ignorance. You know, we can cherish others on the method side, and we can try and do these examinations, find the object to be negated. If we, you know, when you do this meditation, you cannot find the object to be negated. You can't get emptiness. So there's this lovely, you know, it's like, wow, you've got to find the object to be negated. That's easy now, isn't it? Just a self that exists, not dependent upon a name, not dependent upon conception, not dependent upon a body and a mind, not dependent upon cause and conditions. Find the self that's like that, and if you cannot find it, perfect. But if you find it, you'll know you exist inherently. It's either one or the other, isn't it? Rather inherently exist or we don't. Okay, great. So here's for our readings. Pages 19 to 40 on the FPMT readings, 52 to 64 on our readings. And of course, there's some lovely books, as you probably know, by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Venerable Thupten Chodron, Searching for Self, Appearance and Reality, and there's one other too. They're really good.
How
His Holiness,
to see yourself.
How to See Yourself as You Really Are. I mean, they're tremendous, those books. The next week is the Buddha nature. Okay. Glad you're here. Glad we're thinking about this, using this information. We know we want to put an end to our suffering and help others do the same. So, due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel, bodhicitta, not yet born or rising glow, may that born have no decline, but increase furthermore. And as long as space remains, as long as sentient beings remain, may I too remain to dispel the sorrows of the world. And I'm just making an aspirational prayer for one of the greatest teachers of emptiness, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Through unholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, benevolent beings, to you I make this request. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy.
Thanks, Debbie. That's reeling.
So welcome to